So I know because you're so desperate to know, you haven't gone to see Dune Part 2 yet because you're like, I didn't hear what that schmo on YouTube had to say about it yet. That guy who's on the TV and talks about flicks all the time, he hasn't weighed in on Dune Part 2, so I'm going to hold out for this. So in the effort to, make you see this in the theater before it's out of theaters, I figured I would chat about it a little bit. So I went to see Dune Part 2. I think it was like the last day or two that I could still see it in IMAX because it's I think it was shot for IMAX, and it's one of those films that big epic sci-fi epics, any kind of epic, any kind of movie really, but any kind of epic is better on the big screen where the image and sound are huge and high quality. They lose a lot at home. The story is still there, but the impact is not. So I went to see Dune Part 2 at my local IMAX because as I record this, we had a couple other big movies coming out that were just going to repeatedly knock each other out of the big screen. So Dune Part 2, I went to see, I never saw the original Dune. I never watched the TV movies that were done in the 90s based on Dune. I never read Dune. I'm not a fantasy guy. And sci-fi I like. I don't read sci-fi. And I'm more of a Star Wars guy. I'm not a giant Star Wars guy, but if you're going to be like Star Wars versus Dune, I would go with the Star Wars or the Guardians of the Galaxy route, the fun, zippy sci-fi, So I went to see the original Dune Part 1, let's call it, from like 2-3 years ago, and I thought it was good. In the ensuing year or two since it came out, I could not tell you a thing about it. A lot of sand. The actors, vaguely, I could tell you the actors that are in it, but I remember thinking it was good. I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. I'll see the second one when it comes out. So here we are. We're back with the second one, and I'm really no interest in it at all. But I'm like, I kind of want to see it just to see it, and I have this AMC A-list thing that I pay for anyway, so I might as well get some use out of it. So I go to see it, and I remember nothing about the first film. I'm like, I hope I can follow this because it's been a few years and I haven't rewatched it, and I'm not going to an Alamo Drafthouse where they will usually have a pre-show that sort of brings you up to speed and gives you like a highlights version of the previous installment or installments in a film series. And this film worked great. It worked great without that. I don't recall, again, it's already faded from my mind. I don't believe that it had this extensive crawl to tell you the story so far. It didn't have a Star Wars crawl at the beginning or anything like that. It just kind of throws you in, and it does a decent enough job of reminding you, here's who these people are and here's the relationships. It would have probably benefited me if I had remembered it a little bit more, because it took me a little while to like, who's that person again? Why are they doing that? What's that thing they're talking about? But I never felt lost. Really interesting visuals, really well made, good effects, obviously, good performances by everybody. I don't really have a beef with Dune Part 2 at all. It's interesting to watch it in see that some people could watch Dune Part 2 and think it's a movie that is pro-terrorist. Just occurred to me in my head. I wouldn't say that, but it's because it's about a people who live in the desert and giant, more highly advanced than they have access to armies are coming in and sapping them of their resources, and they're fighting back. They're like, get out of here, F.O. But I could see some mindsets watching this thing and going, that's a pro-terrorist film. Call it what you want. It is, it's really well done. Very, very humane film, as the best sci-fi is. It makes me want to watch the David Lynch Dune, which I've still never watched. So I kind of want to watch that now to see how it contrasts with this. I kind of want to talk to people. If you're watching on YouTube, please tell me in the comments if you're like a Dune fan, how accurate was Dune Part 1 and 2 to the books overall? Films tend to have to gloss over and combine things and leave things out because you just can't put everything that works on the page in a film. But the film ends feeling like it's not really the end. Like it's an end of a part of the story. And I didn't know, apparently I've since read that there is, I guess if this film does well enough, the director has got a script, he's good to go with the next Dune. My thought was, I presume they shot these two at the same time and split them in half due to duration, and it's cheaper to get everybody involved in a production to do one huge shoot rather than trying to get everybody back again a couple of years later, and who knows, trying to work that schedule thing out. So my first thought was, geez, if they try to do this again in a couple of years, how's it going to be to get all these people back in one place again? But I would watch another one of these. I would watch a few more of these because it's just, they're well done. They're not stupid. They're not all about the boom booms. They're not all about the bright lights and cute critters and all that stuff. They're intelligent films about, legacies and peoples and empires and religions and all this other stuff. So I don't really have a heck of a lot to say. Not that I've really said much in the last couple minutes here, but I liked Dune Part 2. I would say if you're curious and if you're interested, see it in the theater while you can. We're kind of currently in a spot now where films tend to be staying in the theater for a really long time. We haven't hit probably when we hit the summer, although I'm coming to you from the year 2024 when we had a very long writers and actors strike in Hollywood the previous year, which halted all production. So I'm very curious what release patterns are going to look like this summer and over the next year. I think we're probably going to be seeing a lot of re-releases. This isn't about Dune 2 at all, but I think, which is a long way to say, I don't think films are going to be kicked out of the theaters, especially 16s, plexes, and things like that as quickly as they used to be. So you probably could have a decent amount of time left to see Dune Part 2 in theaters, if you care to. So, in theaters, what am I talking about? Dune Part 2.